This is not just a dinner. It is a night of revenge, hidden behind smiles and shining plates. A son who was betrayed by his own family has returned after 15 years, not to forgive, but to make them face what they did. He invites everyone to a grand dinner, pretending it's a reunion. They don't know it's a trap. Each dish carries a secret. Each toast hides a truth. As the night unfolds, laughter slowly turns into fear. Old lies crawl back to the table and every heart begins to tremble. Because tonight one man will not only serve food, he will serve justice. And before the last plate is cleared, no one will leave the same. Chapter 1. The invitation arrives. The morning sun touched the old mansion, but its light could not warm the people inside. They had everything, money, land, name, yet their hearts were empty. 15 years ago they buried a truth, thinking it would never rise again. That truth now had a name, Arav. Once a quiet boy, thrown out by those who called themselves family. Now his name had returned, printed in gold on a letter that none expected. It began with Mira, the eldest sister. Her maid handed her a silver envelope with shaking hands. The seal was heavy and carved with a single word, justice. She opened it slowly, her eyes catching the first line. "You are invited to the dinner of justice," it said. A chill ran down her spine as she whispered the name. Arav. Within hours, every member of the family had received the same letter. Same handwriting, same message, same silence afterward. It was as if time had turned its face toward them again. Raghav, the uncle who once ruled the family business, laughed at first. "Probably some joke," he said, pouring himself another glass of wine. But his hand trembled. The glass cracked slightly. Kavita, the aunt who once lied in court against Arav, stayed quiet. Her eyes followed the dust floating in sunlight, lost in guilt. Her lips moved without sound, whispering a prayer she no longer believed. The invitation mentioned no address. Only one sentence. "You already know the place." And they did. The same mansion where everything began. That night, the family gathered to discuss the strange message. Their voices filled the dining hall again after years of silence. But the laughter was fake, and the air was heavier than before. "Maybe he forgave us," said Mira, forcing a weak smile. Raghav leaned back, his eyes sharp. "Forgiven? Boys like him don't forgive." The sound of his gold ring hitting the table echoed like a warning. Kavita stood up. "If it's really him, I'm not going." No one answered. Everyone thought the same, but fear held their tongues. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about facing the ghost they created. Outside, the wind carried a strange whisper. It brushed through the old trees around the mansion, and in that whisper they almost heard a voice, calm, distant, and patient. Arav had been gone for 15 years. No one knew where he went or how he lived. But now, his silence was louder than their entire wealth. 3 days passed like a slow heartbeat. Each day, another small sign appeared. A rose at the gate, a clock left running, a candle lit in the dark hallway. Someone was reminding them that the past had found its way home. On the 4th day, a black car stopped in front of the mansion. The driver stepped out, tall, dressed in a white suit. He placed a silver card on the doorstep and disappeared before anyone could ask his name. The card said, "Tomorrow, 8 p.m. wear white, nothing else. No threats. No details, only that." It felt more like a command than an invitation. That night, no one slept. Every sound, the ticking clock, the creaking door, felt alive. The mansion itself seemed to breathe in fear. Raghav walked into his study and opened an old drawer. Inside was a photo. Arav as a boy, smiling with trust in his eyes. He closed the drawer fast, unable to look any longer. Mira stood on the balcony, watching the sky turn silver. She remembered the night they betrayed him, the shouting, the lies, the fear. She thought she forgot, but memory has its own way of surviving. Morning came too soon. White dresses and white shirts hung ready on their doors. Even the servants whispered that something strange was coming. By evening, the mansion looked like a wedding hall. Candles, plates, soft music. But the beauty felt wrong, like a smile hiding a scar. Every guest took their seat, pretending it was just another family dinner. The clock struck 8. The door opened with a quiet click. And there he was, Arav. He looked nothing like the boy they remembered. Calm eyes, straight posture, a face that carried both peace and fire. He smiled slightly and said, "Thank you for coming." No one spoke. No one breathed. Arav walked to the head of the table and lifted his glass. "Tonight," he said softly, "we eat together. For the last time." The candles flickered. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky as if nature itself had been waiting. And deep inside every heart at that table, the fear of truth finally began to rise. Chapter 2. Taste of Truth. The candles burned slowly, casting golden rings of light across the table. Arav stood still, his calm eyes moving from one face to another. For the first time, every member of his family was quiet. No one knew what to say. His presence felt like a shadow that carried both warmth and danger. Even the air in the room seemed to hold its breath. A waiter appeared, dressed in black, carrying silver dishes. He placed one before each person without a word. The covers lifted together, revealing bowls of soup, clear, simple, and steaming. Raghav laughed nervously. "Soup? So formal." Arav smiled softly. "It's called truth broth," he said. The word sounded calm, but the meaning was sharp. Kavita looked at him, her lips dry. "What's that supposed to mean?" Arav leaned slightly forward, his voice gentle but heavy. "It means the first course will remind us where it all began." The family froze. He pointed to the soup. "Each of you will taste it. It's made from the same ingredients we once shared: honesty, love, and betrayal." The room fell silent again. Mira reached for her spoon, hands shaking. She took one sip and looked away, hiding the tears in her eyes. The taste was warm, but memories made it bitter. Raghav slammed his spoon down. "Enough of this drama, Arav." Arav didn't move. "You called it drama once before. The night you blamed me for stealing." The words hit like glass breaking. Arav's eyes turned to everyone at the table. "You said I took the company's money. You said I betrayed you. But it was you, Uncle, who made the lie." The candles flickered as silence deepened. Kavita whispered, "We were scared." "The police?" Arav interrupted, voice still calm. "You were scared of losing your name, not me." His eyes softened for a second. "You let an innocent boy walk into darkness." No one spoke. Outside, rain began to fall, slow and steady against the windows. The sound felt like the world was listening. Mira tried to speak. "Arav, please." He raised his hand. "No need to explain. Tonight isn't about excuses. It's about truth." He turned toward the waiter. "Bring the record." The waiter placed an old recorder on the table. It clicked once, then played a familiar voice. Raghav's from years ago. I don't care what happens to the boy. Blame him. End it. Raghav's face turned pale. The sound of his own voice filled the hall like thunder. No one dared to look at him. Arav smiled sadly. That voice followed me for 15 years. He looked down at his plate. It was the only family memory I had left. Then he turned the recorder off. Mira began to cry quietly. Her tears dropped into the soup, mixing with the steam. Kavita reached for her hand, but Mira pulled away. Arav stood slowly. I didn't invite you to punish you, he said. I invited you to remind you what you did, and what it cost. He looked at each one of them. Do you even remember who I was before that night? The silence answered him. No one could meet his eyes. The truth sat heavier than the meal itself. Eat, he said quietly. Eat the truth you gave me. They lifted their spoons again, trembling. The soup suddenly tasted like regret. Raghav tried to stand but couldn't. His knees felt weak, and sweat rolled down his face. You poisoned this, he gasped. Arav shook his head gently. No poison, uncle, only honesty. Sometimes that's stronger than anything else. He stepped closer. You're only tasting your own fear. The storm outside grew louder. Thunder flashed against the windows, lighting every pale face. Each person sat frozen, trapped between guilt and disbelief. Kavita whispered, Why did you come back, Arav? He answered softly, To finish what you started, the story you wrote with lies. He looked toward the clock. But this is only the first course. A bell rang. The waiter appeared again, taking away the half-empty bowls. In their place, he laid down silver plates covered with white cloth. Arav placed his hand on the table. There are 4 more courses, he said. And with each one, another truth will be served. Mira looked up, eyes filled with pain. Will we survive this dinner? She asked quietly. Arav's lips curved in a faint smile. Depends on what you mean by survive. He turned toward the window. Lightning flashed again, reflecting in his eyes. Justice isn't loud, he whispered. It's patient. The family sat in silence as he walked to the door. The sound of his shoes echoed softly through the hall. He paused once, looking back. Eat well, he said. The second course begins when the clock strikes 9. Then he left the room, his shadow long and calm. Behind him, fear sat at the table, slowly finishing its meal. The thunder rolled again, louder than before. And in that sound, they finally understood. The dinner had only just begun. Chapter 3, The Bitter Truth. The clock struck 9. The echo spread through the mansion like a warning bell. Every heartbeat seemed to count the seconds between fear and truth. The waiter entered again, his face cold and still. He placed the second course before them, silver plates with slices of dark bread. Next to each plate, a small glass of bitter juice waited. Arav walked back into the hall, his white suit glowing in candlelight. He didn't smile this time. His face was calm but unreadable. He stood at the head of the table and said softly, Now we taste the bitter truth. Raghav's voice broke the silence. You think we're scared of food? Arav replied, Not food. What comes with it? He sat down slowly. This course is about choices, the ones that destroyed us. He looked at Mira first. You were my sister, my friend. You could have spoken for me that night. She lowered her head. I wanted to, but they told me to stay quiet. Arav nodded slowly. Yes, silence can be as cruel as a lie. He picked up his glass and raised it. To silence, the sweetest poison. Everyone lifted their glass with trembling hands. The taste was sharp, almost painful. The bitterness spread across their tongues, but the real pain came from memory. Mira began to cry again. Her tears fell into the bread she couldn't eat. I was young, Arav. I didn't understand what they were doing. He looked at her kindly. You understood enough to be afraid. Then his voice hardened. You chose fear over truth. The room went still again, like time itself had stopped to listen. Arav turned toward Kavita. You told the police you saw me take the money. You swore it on your son's life. Her lips trembled. I thought you did it. Everyone said you did. His eyes softened, but his words didn't. You didn't think. You followed. And that's worse. He leaned closer. Because lies don't always start from hate. Sometimes they start from weakness. Raghav laughed again, but it sounded hollow. So what do you want from us now? Tears? Regret? You got your revenge. Arav's voice stayed calm. No, Uncle, revenge is easy. Truth is harder. The lights flickered. Rain hit the windows louder now, matching their pounding hearts. Each person could feel the weight of their past pressing against the present. The waiter returned, carrying a silver bowl filled with white stones. He placed it in front of Arav. These stones, Arav said, were taken from the well behind this house. Everyone looked at him in confusion. You remember that well? He asked quietly. That's where you threw my mother's letters after she begged you to stop the blame. Kavita gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Yes, Arav continued. She came here that night crying for mercy. No one opened the door, so she threw her wedding ring into the well and walked away. His eyes burned softly, but his voice stayed steady. The family sat frozen, staring at the bowl. The stones seemed to whisper with memory. Arav touched one and said, Every lie sinks, but truth always floats back up. Mira whispered, Where is she now? Arav looked at her. Gone. She died before she could see justice. His voice dropped lower. But tonight, she's here, through me. A single candle went out by itself. The room dimmed, shadows growing long and alive. The family could almost feel her presence in the silence. Raghav stood suddenly, pushing his chair back. This ends now, he shouted. We can't live in the past forever. Arav looked up. You don't live in the past, Uncle. You live off it. He rose from his seat, slow and calm. You took what wasn't yours. You built your pride on stolen names. He pointed at the bread. That's what you've been eating all your life. The bitter bread of betrayal. No one dared to move. Raghav's face turned red with shame and anger. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Arav placed the bowl of stones in the center of the table. Each of you will drop one stone into this bowl, he said. Not as punishment, as confession. Mira went first. Her hand shook as she picked up a stone. She closed her eyes, whispered, I'm sorry, and dropped it in. The sound echoed softly like a heartbeat. Then Kavita followed. Her tears fell as the stone hit the others. I don't know if I can be forgiven, she said quietly. Arav said, Forgiveness isn't given. It's earned. Then he looked at Raghav. Your turn. Raghav didn't move. He stared at the bowl, breathing heavily. You're proud, Arav said. Even now. He leaned closer. But pride doesn't protect you from truth. Raghav finally dropped a stone, hard and loud. The sound filled the room, heavier than thunder. Arav nodded once. Good. That's how guilt should sound. Then he turned toward the door. The second course is over, he said softly. The third will be served at 10. He paused. That one will not be about the past. But the price? He walked out again, his footsteps fading into the storm. Behind him, the family sat in silence, faces pale and wet with tears. Outside, lightning cracked, as if the sky itself was writing their punishment. Chapter 4. The Price of Silence. The clock struck 10. Its echo rolled through the mansion like a heavy heartbeat. The storm outside had grown wild, matching the storm inside their souls. Arav entered the hall again, quiet and composed. This time, the waiter followed him with covered trays. The air smelled faintly of spice and smoke. He placed the dishes carefully before each person. When the lids lifted, everyone saw roasted almonds and dark sauce. Arav said softly, "This course is called the Price of Silence." No one moved. The title itself made their hearts shrink. Even the fire in the candles seemed to hesitate. Arav took his seat at the head of the table. "Do you remember what silence cost us?" he asked. "Not money, not property, something far more human." He looked at Mira, whose eyes were still swollen from crying. "You lost your peace," he said. "You've been pretending to smile for 15 years. Mira looked away, ashamed. Her voice trembled. "Every night I heard your voice, Arav." She wiped her tears. "But I was too weak to face it," Arav nodded gently. "Weakness is the quiet form of cruelty." Then his tone grew colder. "And cruelty never disappears. It only waits." He turned toward Kavita next. "You had the power to stop everything. One word could have saved me." Kavita's lips shook. "I was afraid of Raghav, of what he'd do." Arav smiled sadly. "So you let me fall instead." She covered her face with both hands. Her sobs filled the silent hall. Arav let her cry. He knew tears were also confessions. Raghav sat stiff, his hands gripping the chair. "You keep digging into the past," he muttered. Arav looked at him calmly. "The past is digging into you." The waiter placed a small silver bowl beside Raghav's plate. Inside it lay a single old coin, rusty and dark. Arav said, "Do you recognize it?" Raghav frowned, eyes narrowing. "It's from the company vault." "Yes," Arav said. "The last piece of truth I touched before you threw me out." He leaned forward slightly. "That coin bought my exile." Raghav clenched his jaw. "You think you're a saint?" Arav shook his head. "No. Just the son of a woman who died waiting for an apology." His voice lowered to a whisper. "That's the real price of silence. A life." Thunder crashed outside, bright and loud. The light flickered across every face, pale and guilty. The storm sounded like a voice, too. Angry, restless, demanding truth. Mira whispered, "What do you want from us now?" Arav stood slowly. "Not money. Not regret. I want awareness." He pointed toward the window. "Listen to the storm. That's your conscience." The waiter began to serve water. But when Raghav reached for his glass, it slipped from his hand and shattered. The sound broke the tension, but not the fear. Arav walked to the broken glass and picked up a piece. He turned it in his hand, the light glinting on its sharp edge. "Do you know why I invited you here?" he asked quietly. Kavita shook her head. "To make us suffer?" she whispered. Arav smiled faintly. "To make you remember." He set the glass piece down and pointed to the food. "These almonds," he said, "are bitter, like the truth you buried. Eat them, and you'll know what it feels like to live with lies." They obeyed slowly, each taking a bite. The bitterness was strong enough to sting, but the real sting came from guilt. Mira dropped her fork. She covered her mouth as she whispered, "It's too bitter." Arav replied softly, That's how I lived. Every single day. Kavita looked up suddenly, eyes wide. What will you do after this dinner? She asked. Arav said, That depends on whether you learn before dessert. Raghav stood again, trembling with anger. You've punished us enough, Arav. Arav's eyes hardened. Punishment? You haven't even seen justice yet. The rain outside grew heavier. Water streamed down the windows, like tears the sky couldn't hold back. The candles flickered as if struggling to stay alive. Arav stepped toward Raghav slowly. You built your life on fear and lies. You silenced everyone, even yourself. He placed his hand on Raghav's shoulder. Now silence is coming for you. Raghav's breath quickened. He looked around, lost as if the walls were closing in. His voice cracked. What do you mean? Arav whispered. You'll hear it soon. Then he turned to Mira and Kavita. The third course is not about food. It's about listening. He paused, because silence will speak before the night ends. The clock ticked louder now. Every second felt like a drumbeat in their chests. Even the air had weight, pressing down on them. Arav moved toward the door. The next course will decide everything, he said. The truth was bitter, but the price will be heavier. He stopped once more, looking back with calm eyes. Eat slowly, he said. And remember, silence never forgets who created it. Then he walked out into the storm again. The door closed softly behind him. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Mira whispered, Did you hear that? Somewhere in the distance, a faint sound echoed. A woman's voice crying in the wind. Kavita's hands began to shake uncontrollably. Raghav turned pale. The lights dimmed suddenly, and the clock struck 11. The mansion stood between thunder and fear. And for the first time, silence finally began to speak. Chapter: The Taste of Truth. The dinner table was glowing under the golden light. But beneath the calm faces sat storms waiting to rise. Everyone smiled, yet their eyes whispered questions they didn't dare to ask. Arman lifted his glass slowly. To family, he said softly, his voice steady, almost too calm. They raised their glasses, pretending to believe in the word they had already destroyed. The first course arrived. Soup. Warm, fragrant, and peaceful. But no one could taste peace anymore. Mira looked at Arman, searching for the boy she once knew. She wanted to speak, but his cold gaze froze her words. He was not the same brother. He was something different now. Uncle Tariq laughed nervously. Still the perfect cook, Arman. You didn't forget our taste. Arman smiled. No, Uncle. I never forget tastes, especially the bitter ones. The words cut like glass. The air grew heavy, and everyone felt the weight of memory. Suddenly, a quiet knock came from the door. Unexpected, sharp, and strange. A waiter entered, carrying a tray covered with a silver lid. This dish, Arman said, is called remorse. He placed it in front of his mother. Her hands shook slightly. What's inside? She whispered. Only what was always there, Arman replied. She lifted the lid. Inside was a small bowl filled with ashes. The room froze. Arman's eyes didn't blink. These, he said, are the ashes of the letters I wrote from the streets. Letters that never reached you. Tears rolled down her face. No one dared to breathe. Mira broke the silence, her voice trembling. Arman, please. This isn't you. He smiled, but it wasn't warmth. It was pain shaped like calm. Oh, sister, he said. I became what you made me. Silent, but never blind. His tone was soft, yet it carried fire beneath it. He turned his gaze toward Tariq. You stole my father's business and called it your success. Tariq tried to laugh, but his lips failed him. Armin, that was years ago. Yes, Armin interrupted. And tonight, those years have finally come back. He clapped once, and the waiter brought another dish. Betrayal. It was cold, untouched, and lifeless. He placed it before Tariq. Tell me, uncle, he said slowly. How does betrayal taste when it's served back to you? Tariq's face turned pale as silence spread like smoke. Arman leaned back. I'm not here for revenge, he said quietly. I'm here for truth. But truth always hurts more than revenge. His words floated in the air like knives with wings. Mira stood. Enough, Arman! We were wrong, but this is cruelty. Arman looked at her with calm eyes. Cruelty? He said. You called me a thief. You burned my name. And you talk about cruelty? The table trembled under the pressure of truth. Each candle flickered as if the room itself couldn't bear the tension. Even the walls seemed to listen. Then Armin did something none expected. He took a small envelope from his coat pocket. This, he said, is what my father left behind before he died. Everyone gasped. The letter had been lost for years. He placed it in front of his mother. Her hands shook as she opened it. The paper was old, the ink faint but readable. It said, If my son ever returns, trust him. He is my justice. Her tears fell onto the paper. Why didn't you tell us earlier? She cried. Because truth deserves its moment, Armin said softly. And tonight is that moment. He looked around the table, faces pale, hearts racing. Each of them felt the same thing, guilt. For the first time, silence spoke louder than words. Outside, thunder growled across the sky. Lightning flashed through the window like a divine witness. And for a brief second, it lit Armin's face, calm, but full of fire. He stood slowly, his chair echoing across the room. This dinner is almost over, he said. But before dessert, there's one more truth to serve. Everyone stared at him, breathless. Mira whispered, What do you mean? He smiled gently. You'll know soon, sister. Justice is patient, but it never forgets. Then he turned away, walking toward the kitchen door. Every eye followed him, every heartbeat louder than thunder. The door closed behind him, leaving the family in choking silence. They didn't know what the final course would be, but they all feared it would be them. And as the rain began to fall outside, the smell of something burning rose from the kitchen. The truth was still cooking, and the night was not done serving. Line Chapter 6. The Unforgettable Revenge. The thunder outside grew louder, like the sky itself wanted to speak. The family sat frozen, staring at the empty chair Armin had left behind. No one dared to move, not even to breathe. Then the kitchen door opened. Armin walked out, carrying a silver tray covered with a dark cloth. His steps were slow, calm, and measured, like a man who had already decided everything. This, he said quietly, is the final course. Everyone's eyes fixed on the tray. They could hear their own hearts pounding louder than the storm. He placed it at the center of the table. This dish, he continued, is called the truth that was hidden. He slowly removed the cloth. Underneath was a single black envelope. No food, no scent, only silence. Confusion spread across their faces. They looked at each other, afraid to ask. Arman looked at them one by one. I could have chosen revenge, he said softly. But revenge dies fast. Truth lives longer. His words fell like heavy drops of rain. He opened the envelope. Inside were papers, copies of legal documents, ownership proofs, and bank transfers. Everything that had been stolen from him and his father. He threw them across the table. "Here are your lies, written and signed," he said. "Every secret deal, every forged signature, every moment you thought I was gone." Tariq's face turned white. "This can't be real," he whispered. Arman nodded. "It's all real. Just like the pain you left behind." He turned to his mother. "You wanted peace, Mother. But peace built on lies can never stand." She cried silently, unable to look at him. Mira reached for his hand. "Arman, please stop. We can fix this together." He gently pulled his hand away. "No," he said. "You had your chance when I needed you most." His voice didn't shake. It carried 15 years of quiet fire. "This dinner isn't about hate. It's about balance." The lights flickered again. A soft melody began playing, the same tune their father used to hum. Everyone froze as Arman looked toward the old piano in the corner. "I played this song the night before you betrayed me," he said. "No one listened then, but tonight you will." He walked to the piano and began to play. Each note was slow, heavy, and filled with memory. Tears fell down his mother's cheeks as she whispered his name. For a moment, even guilt turned quiet. Then Arman stopped. He stood up and looked at them with calm, steady eyes. "Your punishment isn't me," he said. "It's each other." He took out another envelope and placed it beside the first. "Inside are confessions, signed by every one of you. I recorded your words during this dinner." Shock struck the table like lightning. "What?" Mira gasped. "You recorded us?" "Yes," Arman replied. "And by sunrise, these will reach the police." His calm tone was colder than the rain outside. Tariq stood up in panic. "You can't do this," he shouted. "You'll destroy us!" Arman looked at him sharply. "You destroyed me first. No one moved after that." The sound of thunder mixed with the ticking clock on the wall. Time itself seemed to wait for the last truth to fall. He turned toward the door. "You wanted to know what justice looks like?" he said softly. "It looks like silence after the storm." Mira stood again, crying. "Arman, please, don't leave us like this." He smiled sadly. "I already left you once. You just never noticed." He walked to the main door, opened it, and looked back one last time. The family sat broken, guilt on every face, fear in every eye. No revenge could have hurt them more than their own reflection. Arman stepped outside into the rain. Drops fell on his face like forgiveness from the sky. For the first time, his heart felt light. Not happy, but free. He whispered to himself, "Justice isn't loud. It's quiet, and it always arrives on time." Behind him, the house glowed like a fading memory. Inside, the family finally began to face the truth they had buried for years. Arman walked down the road, disappearing into the storm. No one followed. No one called his name. The only sound left was the rain washing away the past. When morning came, the papers he left reached the police. By noon, the family's empire had fallen. And by evening, the town spoke only one name, Arman. They called him cruel. They called him clever. But no one could deny that what he served that night was not food. It was justice, slow, silent, and unforgettable. Because in the end, it wasn't the dinner they remembered. It was the truth they could never digest. And that was the real taste of justice, the end. The dinner of justice.